Our top story today, investigations are underway in 2 states in the deadly police shootings of 2 black men, both happening this week. The families of Alton Sterling and Philando Castillo are grieving, and many people from Louisiana to Minnesota, even all across the country, are expressing their own anger and frustration. In Washington, the Congressional Black Caucus is calling for a Victims' Bill of Rights.
We have an obligation as the very few African Americans in this country that have the ability to talk on the House floor, introduce legislation, and do the things that we're privileged enough to do, to speak up and take their voices from the streets to the halls of Congress, to the White House, to the Justice Department, and everywhere else that they should be.
President Obama, who is in Poland for the NATO summit, said, quote, all Americans should be deeply troubled by these shootings.
And today in the 4x4, we are joined now by Spencer Whitney, journalist, columnist, and assistant editorial page editor for the San Francisco Chronicle. Thank you for coming in, Spencer. Appreciate it. I was watching one of the protests unfold in the city of Philadelphia, and I saw a sign being held by one woman, and it said, if you are not angry, you are not paying attention. How can you not agree with that?
You know, it's been really interesting to see the social media taking the biggest role, especially when we talk about these shootings and we talk about police brutality and things like that. You know, it's something that has really been on my heart and the heart of many Americans, I feel like, especially black Americans, just seeing how much and how, or should I say, how little has been done in regards to this.
You say it been on your heart. A few years ago, you've experienced an encounter with a police officer in the city of Berkeley. Can you just quickly tell that story?
Sure. I was actually coming home from a First Friday celebration. I was on my bicycle, 2 wheels. Coming back, I was stopped a few blocks away from my house. I was stopped by police officers. They said I had ran a stoplight. This was around maybe 11 p.m., a little bit later than that. There was no one there.
In your bicycle?
On my bike, yes, on my bike. I was stopped. I was made to sit on the curb, the street, for about half an hour while they went through my identification. They searched my bag. They searched me. They asked me many questions in regards to what I was doing. You know, why did I run that stop sign and things? I hadn't done that. And then once they saw I was a Berkeley student, they kind of changed their tone a little bit.
Spencer, this is something the president just talked about a short time ago. He said that if you look at the numbers, black and Hispanic people are more likely than whites to get stopped for an infraction, more likely to get searched, more likely to get shot.
Right.
This is something that's not new, but with the social media coming out, it's being validated. There's proof that these things are happening, but this is something that's been a complaint for years, for generations.
Correct. As you said, this is something that's been going on for a very long time. These stories about police brutality and things, these are not new, especially in the African American as well as the Hispanic community. These aren't new stories. The fact now is that there's cameras around so that when these things happen, we actually have evidence or more video evidence to back these things up, which we've been saying for years.
And Spencer, as a black woman, watching this happen, even separate from my job here, just watching it at home, I'm shaken to the core. It's hard to watch these videos play out. Now, I have never personally experienced anything, but I can name black men that I know, educated, well-informed, raised well, as yourself, black men that go through these experiences. So my question to you, how do we and others explain to America what's happening and why we feel it's happening? You see the protests that happen. They get the signs out, they march, they protest, but we're still talking about it. 2 in 1 week, we are still talking about it.
Right. This has been one of those things where you can look back to even when Mike Brown was shot. You know, and we can look at Ferguson, we can look at Baltimore with Freddie Ray. We can look at all these different instances. And when you talk about we're looking for a reason, explanation, I feel like all the reasons have been given already. There's been countless studies, as you mentioned earlier, in regards to the disenfranchisement, particularly when it comes to police and bias when it comes to policing, especially these communities. I personally don't know what the answer is when it comes to this. The fact is that we continue to protest, we continue to march, we continue to make these things known, whether it's through social media, whether it's on television, or all these other places, and it doesn't seem like anything is really getting done around this.
And Spencer, I know a number of police officers. Just in this job, you have to deal with police officers all the time, and all the officers I know are straight up seem like great guys who would never be involved in anything like this. But if you have 100 police officers in a department and you have one that does something like this, it casts a negative pall over all the officers, not only in that department but across the country. But at the same time, I have black coworkers that I worry about when they're driving home. Are they going to get pulled over? What do blacks have to think about if they get pulled over by an officer, that they have to always have their hands showing? I mean, a minor infraction. This thing in Minnesota, he had a broken tail light and he ended up getting shot reaching for his driver's license and registration. So is it to the point where any black man or Latino man driving and gets pulled over has to be worried that he could possibly get killed?
That's certainly been a worry for me every time I drive, and I really feel like the question shouldn't be so much as, what do black men need to do to protect themselves? The question needs to switch to be,
sure,
what can we do to stop this violence that are happening to black men at such a high rate?
Do you think it would take the Department of Justice, prosecutors to step forward and actually start charging these police officers across the country involved in similar incidents? Is that the step that you would like to see taken? Because in some of these cases, they're not even charged. They don't even see a day in court.
And that's certainly one of the most frustrating things about this, is regardless of how much information comes out, whether it's video evidence, audio evidence, whether all these things are coming together, it still seems like we can't get any conviction on any police when these things go on. And that essentially says to many people that cops are above all these laws when it comes to these killings.
The young man who was killed in Minnesota, Philando, I heard an interview with his mother earlier today, and she had said, I'd always taught him, just comply. Right. Comply with police. That was her argument. But in this instance, she added, after she made that statement, that my son was complying and he's dead.
Right, and there are two sides. So that was one, the Minnesota, where he seemed to be reaching for what he was asked for, right? Some sort of identification. But then you have the other side of the coin. You have Baton Rouge, where there was a struggle and it seemed like a non-compliance. But I hear, the experts talking, former law enforcement talking. In the end of the day, that kind of non-compliance doesn't mean a death sentence. So either side of the coin, whether you're not compliant, whether you are compliant, you just don't know how this interaction will end that night.
Right, and I think that's the biggest fear. Regardless, I also had parents that always stress, to always be polite,
yes,
comply.
Sir.
Yes,
yep.
Comply with the officer. That's something I did even with the case I had in Berkeley a few years ago. And honestly, probably one of the things that hurts the most is, regardless of even when people are complying, even when they're dotting all of their I's and T's and all these things, it still ends up with the death sentence.
What are you doing at the Chronicle on this subject, and what do you think should be done in the media to address this issue?
Well, currently, I actually just wrote a column today in regards to just my feelings about these two recent shootings and just kind of the overall atmosphere that contributes to these shootings and things like that are going on. One of the things I feel that needs to change, or that we need to really pay more attention to, is outside of just the fact that, we have plenty of these shootings that are happening and going on, we want to see results. We're past the point where, it's talking about having a discussion or being tired about these things. We're tired, we're angry, we're very sad that we have to continue to see black women and their children, mothers, crying on television about how they lost their son over what something could have been a routine traffic stop.
Yeah, a 4-year-old girl was in the car with her mother when this man was shot in Alton Sterling was shot in Minnesota, and the reaction from the little girl and the girlfriend was amazing. I mean, the composure that both of them had was truly. I can't imagine being in a car with somebody who got shot and having that kind of composure.
Just that perspective.
Right.
The Facebook Live. We had never seen that before.
I couldn't imagine. And if I may include, you mentioned earlier a question about what could the media do a little bit differently. I think personally, when it comes to these shootings, we tend to look at the victim and find out what their criminal history was, or dig up into their past to find out what the justification could be for why they ended up dead. I feel like that needs to change. And I also feel like when we show these photos, it probably would be better if we actually had a photo of, instead of just a victim as a mugshot or something like that. We tend to be a little bit kinder when it comes to maybe it's officers or maybe other people who have committed crimes instead, but I think that really needs to change in regards to how we perceive these issues.
Sure.
All right. Spencer Whitney, thank you very much. Spencer Whitney, editorial page editor for the San Francisco Chronicle.